Welcome back to SledgeHammer Horror, guys. I am Ken Sledge, and let's talk horror. Today, I'm joined by the amazing Brandon Christensen. Brandon, how you doing, man?
I'm doing good. Thanks for having me. Is your last name actually Sledge?
It is.
Oh, sweet. That works.
Yeah, that's not a stage name or anything. That's my legal born name, man.
You had to do what you did then. You just had to.
Absolutely, man. And I got to say this right off the top. Me and Brandon have been talking a little bit, but you've directed some of my absolute favorite movies that have come out over the last couple of years, whether it be Z, Stillborn, or the newly released Superhost, all of which you can check out on Shudder. I got that link down here in the description. And you've also acted in the criminally underrated Grave Encounters too. So what's it like to see your work taking off the way it has with Z, Stillborn, and now Superhost being one of the hottest movies out right now? What's it feel like for you to watch these things come from your, you wrote these movies too, correct?
Yeah, Superhost I wrote by myself, and then the other two I had a co-writer, yeah.
And then you see these things come from your heart to your brain to your fingers to paper, and then you're directing these people on how to do what is in your heart. What's it like to feel this coming to life for you?
For starters, I was a very, very small actor in Grave Encounters 2. Like I'm on it for maybe 2 seconds. I'm like a vlogger at the beginning, pretending that I'm reviewing it. But yeah, I mean, it's kind of an out of body experience every time you do it, because you spend you spend a ton of time making these things. Just writing is such a long period just to get the script right, and figuring out a way to make it seem like it was easy. Directing is the shortest by far, because it's like 4-week shoot max. Superhost was only 3, but it's a pretty short experience. And then the post-production of the film, because I've edited the films as well, you're just kind of stuck with it. So I don't think every director out there kind of does that whole, the writing, the directing, editing, VFX, and just getting it to the end. So they definitely become like a very personal experience to me, because I am so deeply attached to it. But yeah, I mean, when Superhost came out, it seemed to hit in a real way on like social media and stuff like that. Like there was tons of tweets, there was tons of interest in the film and stuff like that. And yeah, it's always kind of fun just to sort of see people dig what you did. You spent 2 years of your life on. And so yeah, I'm still kind of in the middle of it now with Superhost, because we're going into like the Halloween season, and I'm sure that it'll continue as people continue to discover it. But yeah, I mean, it's it's really cool just to see people dig things that you dig, like,
right.
You can only make these things for yourself. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, no, you're fine. You're saying it's getting all this attention on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook, all the social media stuff, but it's a well-deserved thing, because not only is the story great, the acting is great. You got some great actors in there. Barbara Crampton. There's so many things about Superhost that just click right at the right level. And I gotta say, we talked about this before the show, but for those of you that haven't seen Z, that's a movie I strongly recommend you guys check out. In this movie, I mean, the bathroom scene alone in the bathtub, me and my wife, it got us, man. And the way that your stories, whether it be Z, Stillborn, or Superhost, the way that these stories play out, where you think you're going in one direction, especially with Stillborn and Z, and you end up taking a hard left turn there. These are movies that I think should have been a lot. Z and Stillborn especially, I heard of Stillborn through an ad on Instagram, and I was like, oh, it looks pretty cool, I'll check it out. And I checked it out, and then I raved about it for months, and everybody was like, I've never heard of this. So, these movies, I wish Shudder would get more mainstream attention with the movies that it gets. And it's unfortunate that horror has always been the stepchild in cinema. When, however, you get this, like, especially right now during the pandemic, a lot of the indie filmmakers like yourself are still busting your ass, working so hard and putting out these great things, and we're still not getting the mainstream attention that we should be getting on these films. So the moral of all this, I guess, is thank you for all the hard work you do, because you helped to keep me sane during the pandemic, whether it be with Stillborn and Z and now Superhost. I'm such a big fan of Superhost. And like I said, guys, I've got all the links to these in the Shudder down here, as well as Brandon's social media links. So make sure, please, that you're following him on social media so you can learn what he's up to next. And you can check out some of these movies if you haven't already. Which kind of leads me to my next question, Brandon. I know right now things are kind of crazy because Superhost is all the rage, and that's what you're working on right now. Is there any future projects you have coming up that you can talk about that you don't have NDAs on or anything like that? Or
There's some stuff that is kind of I can't talk about, but my brother and I have been writing some scripts together now, which has been kind of fun because my brother's a great writer, and he was always the writer of the family, and I've been sort of the video film guy, so it always kind of made sense to combine us a little bit, and he could help write,
Mhm.
and I can write a little bit as well. So it's
Yeah,
been
just a
kind of
little.
nice. Yeah. Well, I mean, I'm not as good as him. But yeah, just sort of being in that world now where we can build these things together has been pretty fun. Like the last almost year now, we've been building a bunch of projects up, and it's one of those things that one of them will pop. I'm just not sure which one will right now. The main one that's most likely is kind of a Final Destination type campus supernatural thriller horror
Mhm.
thing. It's pretty cool. We were hoping to shoot it in November, but it seems like financing stuff like that is taking longer than we were expecting. So hopefully early 2022 we'll be on set with that, and then with kind of the turnaround times, it could potentially be next October that it comes out. But yeah, it's always challenging. You never know. I mean, you spend so much time trying to make something, and then all of a sudden the first question is always going to be like, oh, so what's next? And you're just like, I just spent so much time on this thing. Just give me a
Right.
minute. But yeah, I mean, I've definitely been kind of prepping the next things, and I
Mhm.
think that there's some cool stuff coming down the pipeline.
Right. And that's definitely the hardest question for me to always ask people for that same reason. Like,
Hmm.
you've been busting your ass, you worked so hard. Superhost is so fresh. And then it's like, oh, what you doing next? Like, dude, I
Right.
just did this. Let's talk about this that I just
Right.
did. So I
It's a
just
pretty
gotta ask,
natural
man.
question. Yeah.
When you guys, like I said, you don't have to wait for me to keep you updated because I love to keep everybody updated on my guests and what they have coming up. But you don't have to wait for me because you can follow Brandon on social media right down here in the links. But my friend, the reason we're here today, I want to know where horror started for you. You become such a big influence, especially on me. I'm a huge fan of Shudder, and it seems like I'm always gravitating towards the things that you're putting out. I want to know how it started for you, my friend. So your first horror movie was
Uh, it was the It TV miniseries when I was in kindergarten. So it was like 1991, whenever that, or 1990, whichever year that was. I was in kindergarten. I know this because I watched it and I was too afraid to go to the bathroom at school. So I assumed that a blood balloon would come out of the sink. And because of that, I just refused and pissed my pants at school. And it just became a whole thing. But yeah, that was definitely the first that I can remember. And it stayed with me for like 8 years. It was one of those things that just sort of, never left. And that was kind of my entire childhood. I can remember just sort of that. I mean, you've got it behind you in the corner. That face, yeah, that
right
face was
there, baby.
basically, yeah, I would just see that in almost every other night in my nightmares. That would come out. So that's definitely the one that kind of kicked everything off for me.
I can imagine your kindergarten teacher watching this, like, fuck, I knew it. I knew there was a reason.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it's funny
maybe I
because
don't
some
know.
people don't count this as a movie because yes, it was a TV miniseries, but the influence that this has, and back then that's what we got a lot of the time with a
Right.
limited series like this. Like whether it was this, The Langoliers, Rose
Hmm.
Red, sometimes they come back. A lot of the
Yeah.
Stephen King stuff was a lot of made for TV, but it doesn't change the fact on how scary this is and how it still
Right.
holds up today.
Totally.
Do you remember who watched it with you the first time?
I would have to assume it was my parents, my brother maybe. I don't know.
Mhm.
I don't know why they let me do it because I have kids that, I have a kid in first grade and fourth grade, and I don't think the older one would want to watch it, but I don't know. I mean, there must have just been this allure to it because it was, back then I still have the big hardcover of it, the classic Storm Drain with the green fingers coming out. And it was just like a book that my dad always had on his shelf, and you'd see it all the time because it's so big and so thick, and just that picture on the front is so iconic. I would imagine that I knew about it just from seeing the book, and then my dad was probably excited to see this miniseries because he loved the book, and I don't know why they let me watch it, but they did, and it totally scarred me for a long time. And yeah, it was just one of those things that I don't know, just sort of left like such an imprint on me as a kid.
And I bet a part of it was just like with my parents. It's like, oh, this is made for TV. It's probably not as strong as some of the other things we watch.
Uh-huh.
But this movie makes you use your imagination a lot too.
Right.
And it really holds up with the practical effects that they did. There are some that you watch now and you're like,
For sure.
but it still overall holds up. Now, I got to take you back, Brandon, to 5-year-old Brandon, sit in front of that TV, watching this with your parents. This is a movie that has scenes that we could talk about for hours. So many iconic scenes that are in this film. But which scene would you say it was that affected you the most?
It's either the shower gym where he opens it, he opens up the drain and he comes out and talks to them, or it's when Beverly's in the bathroom and the blood balloon comes out and kind of blows up and the blood goes everywhere and the dad comes in and he can't see it. That scene I still think is way more effective than what they did in the new one. And it's so grungy in the new one that you can't even really tell it's blood. Like it just feels very brown and dark and gross, and it is gross and all that stuff, but the stark contrast between the blood on Beverly and the blood on this white, very white, pristine bathroom, it just, the contrast is just there, that it's just like, why can't the dad see the blood? It's such a weird concept. And so just sort of having that, the bathroom's such like a secure place, that's the last place you want to be messed with. And so to all of a sudden not even be comfortable going there was such a deal. It's like, I have to go to the bathroom, but I don't want to go to the bathroom, so that was kind of the big thing.
And like you said, especially his reaction, how he's holding the sink and the blood's getting all over his hands. And he's just like, I worry about you, Bevy. I worry a lot, like
totally.
Even him, like that monotone voice. And because you know that there's obviously something very wrong going on in that house. And for her, and there's also that clarity moment too, where she has the boys come over and they all clean it up and the blood never comes back, which shows the absolute power of the friendship that they have. So with this movie, I always ask this because when we talk about franchises, I ask what's your favorite franchise, a movie in the franchise. But since we do have a remake of this, did you watch It Chapter 1 and 2, the new releases? And what are your thoughts on It Chapter 1 and 2?
Yeah, I was super excited. I thought the trailers for it were so good. They had that sound motif, that like, that repeating thing. It was so cool. And then, the cast was great. The production values were so good. When I went on opening night, Friday night, to the Chapter 1, and I was so excited for it. And we went to a 10 o'clock screening or something like that, and I hated it.
Really?
I did. Yeah. I was just like, I was so nervous going into it because of my personal history with it, that I was just, I've read the book and everything. I love the book, but I just was never scared, other than the projector scene. There was the scene with the garage and the projector and stuff that was new to the material. That was really cool and scary. And the opening too, with Georgie and the paraffin boat and all that stuff. That was great too. But for the rest of it, it was just like, Pennywise was never that scary because he was always being, he was never really a threat. Patrick in the sewers was killed by him, but you don't see anything. Like a bubble pops in front of his face and it's a little jumpy scare. But for the most part, it's like Pennywise didn't do anything. Like there was no reason to be scared like there was with Tim Curry, because he didn't do anything. So, I mean, I felt like his performance, it's really funny because that was the big thing going into the film, was how is he going to live up to Tim Curry? And he didn't live up to him. He created a whole new thing. It's like Batman, it's like, Michael Keaton's a great Batman. Christian Bale's a great Batman. James Bond, same thing. Like there's great Bonds. That doesn't mean that one's better than the other. They're doing different things. And so, I mean, the films have so many good things going for them. The kid cast is unbelievably good. The production values are awesome, but it was never scary, and it drove me insane. I was just like, no kid's going to watch this and be as scared as I was when I was 6 watching, Tim Curry's Pennywise. And so it was just frustrating for me. And I saw it again later when it came out on Blu-ray. I bought it on iTunes, and I enjoyed it a lot more because the story is still the story. I think they did a good job at adapting it, but it was just like, I appreciated it, but it still wasn't as good as the original, and I'm not a purist or anything like that. Like I was fully ready to love this, and it completely replaced that for me. But I've seen the TV miniseries again, and while the second half sucks, the first half is still great. Like the kid stuff, all the characters, everything's really good. And it was just kind of a bummer because I just want it is such a property and a franchise that should be just like the scariest thing on TV, you know, and it just never did that. And then with the sequel, again, opening weekend, I went, I hated that even more. And for the same reason. And it's funny because it opens up with the gay bashing scene, which is super good. It's so effective. You know, it just makes you feel like, oh man, Derry is not a place you want to be. You know, the 27 years are coming back around, and this town is haunted, and only certain people know about it, and all that stuff. And so you have this horrible scene at the beginning where you just like feel really bad about it, and it makes you dread what's coming. But then it turns into a Goosebumps movie where it's like, you know, you have the amazing scene with Jessica Chastain sitting across from the old lady, and it's so creepy. All the weird build up with everything, that like running around naked and stuff like that. And then all of a sudden, just out of nowhere, it's like big googly monster with eyes kind of going all over the place. It's like, what the hell are we doing here? Like Paul Bunyan, the statue is this giant smile. It's like, what? Like none of this is scary. You know, like I want to be scared for these characters. And there was some stuff like the funhouse mirror with the kid and stuff that was really effective. But in general, it just felt like a Marvel version of a horror movie. And I mean, it's so well made, it's so well directed, but every punch was pulled that you never felt like shit like you do at the beginning of that, you know, the second chapter when the gay kid gets killed. It's just like it's just, I don't know. There's a mean-spiritedness to the town of Derry that is just totally glossed over in the films. And it's just a bummer because it's just, they had everything. And I'm sure it's not God, what's his name? The director. Why can't I think of his name?
Andy Muschietti.
Yeah, Andy. It's not his fault. He's obviously an amazing director. It's just you've got this property that was so successful that you can only push it so far. You know, it's kind of a victim of its own success because I don't know. It's a bummer, but I mean, there has been rumors. I guess I'm gonna talk about this forever because it's.
No, you're fine. Like, I love this.
It's definitely the one franchise in horror that I'm very passionate about because of my, you know, ties to it. But one thing that bugs me too was the kids were so popular, so they had to bring back the kids, and it doesn't make any sense in the sequel because we already know what happens to them. So it has all these scenes that are they feel like deleted scenes from the first one that they added, but they're not because the kids are older and their voices have been manipulated and stuff. But it's just like when you're watching it, you're just like, why are we watching this? You know, this is like 45 minutes of the film that could have been cut and it would have been a tighter, better film because I know that none of them are in danger. I already know the ending, not because I read the book, but because the first movie showed me. So it's just like, we're just rehashing the first movie, just showing like slightly different versions of these scenes. None of them are really scary. One thing that pissed me off, and you'll probably know what I'm talking about. What's the fat kid's name? Ben? Yeah. He hides in the locker in his scene, and there's a New Kids on the Block poster behind him. And they didn't do anything with that poster. There's like this creepy smile right behind him. And I'm watching and I'm like, oh, that's so, you remember the TV miniseries when Georgie winks at Bill? Winks at, it's creepiest shit ever. But I was like 100% expecting something to happen with that face. And maybe they subverted my expectation, whatever. But that was such a good opportunity that they didn't take. And then it's just another like, oh, CG running really fast and nothing happens. And I was just like, the fire face, exactly. And it's just like, God damn it. I wanted just something to just give me that creepy feeling, and it never did past that opening scene. And again, I like the ritual of Chud and stuff. That was fine. It was its own thing. I mean, it's an impossible thing to shoot. So it is what it is. I thought it was all fine. It was just, at the end of the day, it just wasn't the experience that I was hoping for. I do think that they've been talking about doing the director's cut where it actually starts as adults and weaves through the story properly. I think that would be really cool to see, where you wouldn't have the kid version first and then the adult version. It would be done how the book is done. I would still like to see that because, they did such a good job of capturing everything. I just wish that they would lean into the horror of it more because it should be terrifying,
Absolutely. And one thing I was gonna say, I think the second one was completely held together by Bill Hader's performance.
Right.
Bill Hader's performance in it, chapter 2, was just absolutely superb.
For sure.
Everything he does in that movie really showed me that he's not a background actor in comedy movies. He can be an actor, you know, and that's what I loved about that. And the big thing for part 2 that really turned me off is how scary Stan's death was in the 1990 miniseries when they come in and he's in that bathtub and it has its back on the wall, or just it written on the wall. I was waiting for something like that. And I agree with you. That's the biggest problem that I find. Like, I just went and seen the new 2021 Nia DaCosta's Candyman. And I want to say, everybody, just because I dislike something doesn't mean that I'm shitting on it. It wasn't for me. The movie was a powerful movie, but the same thing that you're talking about, it never, Nia DaCosta's Candyman, which Nia DaCosta is fucking amazing. I hope she comes back and does more horror work, but you never have that scene in the garage with Tony Todd's Helen, you know, that skin crawling voice. And you didn't get none of that in this. Just like with It chapters 1 and 2, you never had those big scare moments of us sitting in front of our TV as kids that just, you know, shakes us to our core. So I agree with you that when they do these movies, if you're going to remake a film, please keep it in the spirit and keep it scary like the other ones were. I completely wholeheartedly agree with you on that. I do want to bounce back to the miniseries real quick. We talked about which scene affected you the most, Brandon, but I want to go a little bit deeper than that. What would you say your favorite scene from the miniseries is?
I mean, I was always a big fan of the kids just being kids, you know, the earlier days before the Bowers and all them kind of, you know, are attacking them and stuff like that. So when they're meeting each other and they're forming the bonds, because I mean, that's what the whole book is about these friendships. And that's, you know, it's you have these friendships when you're a kid and you grow apart, and then it brings them back together and they have to deal with it. So just, it's just sort of like the pure childhood in the 50s stuff was just so just so well cast. You know, I thought, you know, Seth Green's in there. They had a really good kid cast that, you know, I mean, the new movies did as well. They were just as good or better, but it's just sort of having the purity of childhood before it gets tainted by these horrible nightmares. I think that's always kind of my favorite part, you know, just sort of the sweetness, like it's the Stand By Me before they find the body kind of stuff.
I was just gonna make that comparison, man. Like, Stephen King has a way of making the innocence of children really stand out. You know, even at the end of Stand By Me, I never had any closer friends than I did back then. You know, like, that's so true. Like, you'll never have that true, pure love of friendship as you do with those first, you know, the first couple friends that you have that you really learn the world with. And that's something that Stephen King really does capture very well. And a scene that I want to talk to you about, because I would have loved to have seen them play off this in the new It movies. When Ben goes down to the quarry for the first time and he sees his dad out there waving.
Such a good scene in the original. Yeah, I agree.
Yes. Like,
and did he have the buttons?
To have that storyline in the new one. Yeah. Then he starts to slowly turn into the clown. First, I think he turns into the skeleton, and then he's got the buttons, and then he comes back and he's just the clown pointing at him. Yeah. You know, and I wish they could have captured some of those type of moments in this newer movie. Yeah. Those are the ones that scared me the most. You know, like, you got his dad, "Hey, Ben, come down here, buddy." Then his voice starts to, "We all float down here, Ben." You know? And another thing you brought up that we didn't get to really work on, I wrote it down so we could talk about it, but the differences between Tim Curry and Bill Skarsgård's portrayals of the clown. The big thing about this is when you look at Tim Curry, I get more of the Ed Gein type of feel where
a real clown that is just dressed up rather than being pulled from a separate time like Skarsgård is.
And he's scarier to me because that type of clown that Tim Curry portrayed was approachable. He was like just an approachable circus clown that turned into a monster, but Skarsgård's clown is always just fucking terrifying. The minute you see him, you're like, no kid's gonna go up to that clown. You know, so that's why I've always been a bigger fan of and again, Skarsgård, amazing how he can do that stuff with his eyes, how that's all practical. That's incredible. But I, just like you, I'm a bigger fan of the Tim Curry one. Now I get to the hard question here. We always talk about in horror movies, death, darkness. Those are the things we love the most about our horror movies and the story, but we always look for the kills. So the dark question of the day, which kill is your favorite or the one that affected you the most from the miniseries a bit?
That's a tough one. Trying to remember the deaths in the original miniseries.
You don't have many, but the
Yeah,
ones
you
that you have are
don't.
very strong. You got Eddie, you got Stan, you got Georgie, and then you got Belch when he gets stuck
Oh,
into the pipe.
it's
You know,
yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's 100% Georgie. It's always Georgie. I mean, that's always been the thing. You know, I remember when I was seeing the chapter one, the new one in the theater, I was legit scared of what that opening scene was going to be because I didn't
mhm.
know. You know, the music comes in, it's got the pretty piano melody, and you know what's going to happen because Stuttering Bill is going to send his brother down to the basement to get the wax, and it's just like there's this feeling of dread where you're like, oh God, I know what's about to happen. You know, this is going to set us off and all that stuff. And so I mean, it's funny how similar both the movies are. Like they're opening the music even. I don't know if they use the exact same music for the piano theme, but it's very similar. But
I think it's a variation, like a newer
yeah,
variation of it.
either way, it's just a very creepy, somber tone that plays while this horrible thing happens. And I don't know if you ever read, like, because Cary Fukunaga's script leaked a long time ago before the movie came out. I don't know if you ever read it. I
Mm-mm.
read it and I thought it was great. It was before they were going to do the adult version too. It was just going to be the childhood thing. It's not too dissimilar than the one we got, but it had certain things that were a little bit different. But yeah, I was really excited for this because the script was so dark. Like it was a very dark script. Anyways, going back to Georgie, yeah, just the thought of sending your brother to his doom and you don't even know it is just such a terrifying prospect. So I don't know why I didn't even think about that, but I still think you know, again with chapter one just took it a little bit too far with like the giant mouth and it's just like you're showing too much. It's so much creepier when, you know, you just have Tim Curry's eye, you know, open up and just his mouth is sharp teeth filed
Mhm.
to a point. And it's just like, that's so scary because it's like the last thing Georgie saw. And instead of having like, okay, this is this intimate encounter with this clown in the sewer. And then all of a sudden, you pull back, you're in this big wide and you're seeing it all happen. And it's just like, I'm not scared anymore. I'm seeing it. It's whatever. It's cool. It's well done. It's just, I'm not scared anymore because you've pulled me out of the intimacy of those two people having a conversation.
And let me use my imagination.
Totally.
And what I love about that first kill with Georgie in the 1990 miniseries
Yeah.
is you have the teeth coming,
Right.
and then it cuts right to the overhead panning shot of the coffin.
Right.
You know, like it just, and like I love that about the earlier films. Even if you go back to like the Psychos and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the ability for them, like Toby Hooper, Alfred Hitchcock, to make us use our imagination with what we're seeing. You're not completely painting the picture for me. You're
Right.
giving me the tools and you're letting me paint that picture however I want
Right.
to paint it. I love having to use my imagination when I'm watching a film, and this film really captured that. Sure, a lot of it was because of budget and because it was made for
Of course.
TV, but it's effective, so
Yes.
effective.
And
So we talked about your first horror movie, Brandon, and what that movie means to you being it. But now, my friend, I do want to go scream on you here for a second. What's your favorite scary movie? What is your favorite horror movie of all time?
So this is a question I do a lot of podcasts, and they always bring up this question, and it's definitely something I need to think about because it's such a diverse group of films. You know, like the subgenre or horror as a genre has so many subgenres in it that I love certain things about certain ones. Now, Scream is a film that was I saw in the sixth grade, I believe, maybe the seventh grade on Halloween with my family. And I actually wanted to touch on this just to going back to what you just said about using your imagination. Because when I was either fifth or sixth grade, we did the Halloween thing at night where the family sits down and watches a horror movie, and we watched The Shining. And when I saw it then, I didn't really see everything because my mom was sitting beside me, and any time that there was a scene, you know, a naked, wrinkly old lady steps up in the tub, she's gonna grab me and cover my eyes, and I'm
Sure.
forced as a kid with an active imagination to start filling in the blanks in a way that the movie never could, you know. And so that got my imagination going like, holy crap, if my mom is this scared about something, it must be
Yeah.
so scary to see. So all of a sudden you create something that's far worse. And then, it, you know, that just creates this way, this like new ultimate scare because it's just like, not only are you not seeing it, it's scaring everybody else too. And you just don't, you know, you're just sort of left in the dark. And she did the same thing when I saw Scream. Like there was a couple scenes where she grabbed me, pulled me in. What year did that come out? Was it 97?
96.
Okay, it's 96. So I was in the 6th grade, I think. And yeah, same thing. So it was just she would grab me, cover my eyes, and it's just like you're fighting her, you're hearing screams. It's and it's not like Scream is that scary of a film. It's just so well written, and the characters are all great, and it does such a great job with the meta commentary stuff. But anyways, going back to your question, the film that I think the best way to put it is the film that affected me the most. Like seeing it in pure way where it did exactly what it was trying to do and it totally messed me up. And that would have been the Blair Witch Project. Because
nice.
I saw the original Blair Witch Project in the summer of must have been 99, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah. So it's the summer of 99. I was in Langley, BC, and we were staying at my cousin's house, and they got a pre-release tickets for me and my cousin, and I knew nothing about this thing. Now, I'm sure. How old are you?
I'm 35.
Okay, so I'm a year older than you. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, man.
But
I completely agree. This movie fucked us up, man.
Do you remember the marketing campaign for that film?
Oh, yeah, I've talked about that on the podcast so much.
Yeah.
You talk about The Exorcist and the Blair Witch Project. No movies will ever be able to capture that again, because back when we seen this movie, we didn't have Google in our pocket.
Right.
So we thought this was real.
Yeah, it's because we looked it up on their computer. We're like, well, we're going to this movie. It's about these documentarians and blah blah blah. And so we look it up and we find the website that they made for this movie, and we're like, this thing's real? Like, what is this? And so I go to the movie. I'm in the 8th grade in the summer. I think it was between 8th and 9th. And I go to a midnight screening with my cousin, knowing absolutely nothing about this film. And so we watched the whole thing, and I 100% thought it was real for the entire experience, and went home after or back to my cousin's house and couldn't sleep because it was the scariest thing I'd ever seen. And I was like crying in bed because I couldn't believe what I just saw, and I believed it to be real. And then it was just like the most pure terror that I've experienced from a film. And so I think even though like it's definitely not the same now, when you watch it at home or whatever. It's definitely dated and all that stuff, but it pioneered so many things in such amazing ways. And that the marketing again was just so next level that just in terms of just like my favorite horror experience would definitely be the Blair Witch.
And you go back and watch that movie now, it doesn't even have a title card on it. They don't have the title card until the very end of the movie, which is another way. You don't have an opening credit scene where it's, you just go right into, boop,
totally.
Here we are, and it was brilliant. And like I said, that they wouldn't be able to do that today because of the amount of the internet stuff that we have. It would totally spoil that experience.
Yeah, I think the closest that they came was Paranormal Activity. Because it had a very viral marketing campaign as well. Just that it was like the scariest thing ever. It didn't have like the this is real kind of thing, but they did the whole, invite us to your city thing where they would like put out these Facebook groups where you could vote and stuff and try and get them to bring the film to you. And so that was a similar thing where that one was a very scary experience as well, because I went to that alone. My wife doesn't like horror. And so I went to that, and when I got home, it was nighttime. My mom, she wasn't there. She was with her mom somewhere, and so it was just like me alone in a house, and that's the whole thing. It's just like all of a sudden, your safe space is no longer, and
waiting for your pots and pans to start falling down.
Exactly. So scary. It was so good.
If you remember the first trailers for Paranormal Activity, didn't even show the movie.
Right.
It just showed people in a movie theater screaming and stuff. Like, so
Genius.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, man. Well, Brandon, this has been such an amazing time, man. Getting to know you, getting to know how horror started for you. Someone that not only I consider a friend now, but someone that is such an inspiration to me with the films that you make. But we always end this podcast with the same question. We're going to go back to the 1990 It miniseries. And what we're going to do is we're going to rank this on a skull count. 0 being the worst and 5 being the best. Now, we're not being critics. We're not judging it on production or anything like that. What we're doing right now is strictly judging it on how this movie affected you on your first viewing. So 0 skulls being the worst and 5 being the scariest. You can use half and quarter skulls. What would your ranking of It be?
I mean, I saw it at a time where that was not something I should have seen. And so, like I said, that movie legitimately affected me in a way that it's hard to really describe. It literally took 8 years of my life and gave me these chronic nightmares because of it. Same nightmare. Pennywise was in my closet. My brother and I would have to, get him when he escaped. And it was always the
Right.
same thing. And then I didn't stop having them until I was in the 8th grade when I watched it with friends again. And I was kind of like, oh, this isn't very good. Like all of the things that I was so scared of, they were just kind of cheesy. And I was seeing past what I saw when I was a kid. And
Right.
so, I've seen it a bunch of times in my life. It was the first movie I watched with my now wife. I made her watch it with me, which is funny.
Good man.
Because she hates horror, so I definitely forced it on her. But yeah, I mean, I would have to give it just because of the again, the impact was so big on me that literally now I guess a quarter of my life was scarred by this thing. I'd give it a 5 just because I can still turn it on at any time and just watch it because cheesy effects aside, it is just the characters are so good that Stephen King wrote that it seems to always translate to whatever feature version of it. But yeah, I mean, it's just one of those things. Like that has my childhood is totally connected to me. Similar. And do you know what's crazy is that when I saw it, no, I guess this was everybody, but it was like 27 years after the miniseries came out, right? Wasn't it
Yeah.
like 2017 or something?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that was just like
Perfect marketing.
So crazy. I mean, you can't do. I don't know why I thought that was specific to me because we all aged at the same time. But I realize now that was dumb. But yeah, it was just like one of those things where it's like 27 years later, it's back to haunt me again, and that was why I was so bummed that it just didn't. It just didn't.
And it's funny because this is a movie I have not upgraded. I still have the VHS. Unfortunately, this is my wife's copy. The one that we had in our video store was the 2-tape,
right?
Where it was,
that.
And I don't know what happened to it. I grew up in a video store. My parents owned a video store, so I was very spoiled in that. Cool. And that kind of segues me into what I wanted to say before we end this episode. This has been a very special episode for me, not just because I got to have you, but we are filming this on September 20th. And 2 years ago today, I lost my mom. And, this is, it's been a very hard, very long day for me. And being able to come home and look forward to this all day has kind of made this day a little bit easier. But I wanted to dedicate this episode to my mom, the person that not only gave birth to me, but gave me my love of horror, gave me my integrity, my honesty, my work ethic. It's all thanks to you, Mom. Wendy Braun, I love you and I miss you every day. And I wanted to thank you for doing this episode with me today because I didn't want to postpone it. I didn't want to reschedule it. This has helped me to get through today a little bit easier because I've had something all day to look forward to. Sure. So you've made today a little easier for me, my friend. So I want to say from the bottom of my heart, thank you for being a part of this with me. And for real, it means a lot to me that I was able to have you on. Like I said, the minute that we got in contact and you said you were willing to do this, it made my whole day. I went right to my wife and showed her and she freaked out. We're both big fans. So being able to do this with you has been so much fun. Don't go anywhere, brother. I have a couple more questions for you. Everybody else, thank you so much for watching. Keep talking horror. Stay what you are. And we'll see you guys soon.